most likely it's being purchased by someone to live in, because it's the only reason why you would do that in the current interest rate environment, which is actually going to make competition for rentals even tougher.
Yep.
And I can see rental rates going even higher. So I think we need...
Welcome to The Flow, Real Estate and Money Show. For people in Canada looking to understand the home buying process, to demystify real estate investing, and to make mortgage financing accessible for anyone. The goal here on this show is to help people understand ways to make their money work for them, get in the market sooner, and realistically, completely open up the box on how mortgage financing works. I'm Alex McFadyen, your host, and I can't wait to help get you into the flow.
Oh, we got a doozy for you today, and we talked mostly about, guess what? Pugs and sweaters. Okay, before you actually hang up or turn off this podcast, you want to listen to this one. There is a ton of content, and no, it wasn't just sweaters and pugs, but there was some of that in there as well. I've got my great friend, David Smith of David Smith's Home Group. Also, he is one of the owners of Royal LePage Wollstonecroft, a brokerage in Langley, BC, to come on the show today. He's been on my previous podcast in the past and was one of the most highest listened to guests because of the way that he explains and articulates his opinions and points. I loved this conversation because we bantered back and forth about some of the predictions from 2023 and whether or not they came through, and we've got some predictions for 2024. Wait to listen to this because I would love to hear your feedback on whether or not you think we're right or wrong. As always, if you're loving the show, please make sure to rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify and share this out to the world because I want to help more people have a better relationship with real estate and money. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the other side.
Cheers, my friend.
It's not even a caffeinated minute, and we are caffeinated. Let's go.
We're going for it. We're back for round 2 of a caffeinated minute, and there's probably a lot of people that are going to say, "What the heck is a caffeinated minute?"
This isn't a
because I know we're not talking about caffeinated minutes here. We're talking about sweater scores. You think let me get into it? No, we're good. Sweater score round 2. This is going to become an annual event. Hopefully, we can find a way. Maybe in the summer.
That idea. Yeah.
In the summer, we got to make it like tropical Hawaiian shirts. We'll figure out a way to do a score. For those who didn't listen to the previous podcast and missed out, my good friend David Smith is welcome to the show for the first time, but not the only time, the Flow State Podcast. Welcome, David.
It's not the first time. We did it last year. That's what we're talking about.
No, this podcast. This is a different podcast.
Okay. Got you. Yeah, well, it's great to be back.
There we go.
For the first time.
We've got new listeners. We got to remember that those guys don't know about that one yet. So they're going to pick this up. Sweater scores from last year with the previous pod. Dave came on and gave a fantastic breakdown of what he thought sweater scores would be. And we'll explain what this is, guys. Out of 10 for the impact of changes on real estate in the coming year. All right, let's explain what a sweater score is. Dave, over to you.
Well, you actually dubbed it. You named
it. True.
I called it the impact score.
Yeah.
And you were like, it's the sweater score. So the sweater is back. David Smith Homes Group. It's my Christmas sweater. It's that time of year. I think we're launching this mid-December. But we're looking ahead to the year to come. Some of the changes that happened last year, we made our predictions on. Today, we're going to talk about our predictions on this coming year.
Yeah, to be clear, the sweater is how many sweaters out of 10 sweaters equals what our thoughts are on the impact that these things will have on the environment. And so we'll have to recap. We'll take a little start here in the beginning of the show and recap last year's sweater score and how close you were to...
It was really close.
Yeah, I think so too. For the most part, they were on point, which is awesome. And I think I get a chance to make a sweater score this year, so I'm pretty pumped on that. Even though I'm not wearing a sweater, I got to get one of these. Hold on a second here. Before we got to talk really quickly about these sweaters because, again, not a lot of people know about these sweaters. Tell us the backstory on the David Smith Homes Christmas sweater.
Well, everybody knows I'm a sweater man. I mean, maybe your new audience don't, but I'm well known for the sweaters. And yeah, I decided to get 100 custom-made sweaters from Ireland. David Smith Homes Group Christmas sweaters. We're going to use them as a fundraiser for one of our charity partners, one of our non-profit partners. So yeah, I've got about 80 of them left. There's like a minimum donation required to that partner. If anybody wants one, you let me know.
Yeah, and I think that we're missing so many key points of this story, but how did you make the decision to actually push go on these sweaters?
I don't remember, but
I remember.
I just remember it costing me thousands of dollars.
We'll just say there were some decisions made on an evening that resulted in thousands of dollars, and a great decision at that to have Chris's sweaters.
So I can wear it every day in December.
And if you're listening to the pod, all this just sounds like gibberish. So make sure to check out the photos and check out the YouTube video so you can see that, and you'll see the clips there. So sweaters scores out of 10. Let's do a quick recap on 2023, and there were some things that we didn't expect to happen, but whatever. We're going to just talk about what actually happened. So last year, one of the considerations was what's happening with interest rates. Now, obviously, I shared my feedback last year. We're not getting into the whole shebang, but you rated that a 9 out of 10 sweaters as far as the impact is concerned as to where interest rates would lie as an impact to the real estate market. And I'd say you're pretty on point there.
9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 turned out to be accurate.
Yeah, and well, this episode is mostly about what we expect going forward, but a quick summary. The moment that interest rates started going down in March, the market actually took off, as you know, and the moment that rates started raising again, the market died, and of course, the moment that rates started pausing, well, guess what? The market started moving again.
Perfect correlation. So
step by step.
9 out of 10.
Nothing that surprised anyone. Foreign buyer ban. Last year, you said that the foreign buyer ban would only have a 2 out of 10 sweater score, which means that, and for those who don't know, there was a ban on and is a ban on non-residents to buy real estate in Canada. Now there are, and they have made some slight modifications as to what is a foreign buyer, but you said 2 out of 10. I'd say that was pretty on point. I don't have any data to substantiate that, but
it didn't do much at all.
Yeah, it didn't move the needle.
One of the reasons that I said that then, and that I would reiterate it now, is that we just haven't had that many legitimate foreign buyers, particularly in our marketplace out here in the Valley.
Yep.
Like having seen hundreds and hundreds of real estate contracts, there's a little box that you have to tick if you're not, a resident according to kind of your income tax status. So either a citizen or a permanent resident. The number of times I've seen that box initialed on a contract, I could count on the hand out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of transactions.
Definitely. Yeah, I would argue I've seen bare minimum as well. Anti-flipping tax. So last year, the government, essentially they formalized the idea of taxing you if you flip homes, whereas previously they were actually doing that before, but they just didn't have it formally done. Different
accountants were giving different times, and it was kind of a little bit of a luck of the draw. Like, could be 6 months, could be 2 years,
Yeah.
So they formalized it. You're right. What score did I give?
Yeah. So 2 out of 10 sweaters. And just to be clear on what that was, is basically a rule that says if you own the property for less than 12 months and your sole intention is likely to buy it and make money off the property, unless you could prove there was some hardship or some personal reason, which some people could, then you get taxed on the increase.
And this is one of the reasons I felt it was going to be low, and it turned out to be low.
Yeah. We definitely didn't see much of that as far as our local markets, maybe in Eastern Canada, but I really doubt it. There's only been a few. The other one would be a rental restrictions no more. That was a big one. I mean, as far as announcements are concerned, they basically said like a strata, for those who don't know this already, stratas could ban rentals, and the BC NDP said, okay, now you cannot do that anymore. You have to allow people to rent out of your building, which to be honest with you, of all the different things, I felt like that was a decent change, like a good change.
Too, and I think the sweater score reflects that. What did I give?
You gave it a 6 out of 10 sweaters. So, I mean, that one's been interesting to look at. I don't have any data to substantiate that at this point right now, but I'd say that's probably on point. It made a difference, but not a crazy.
So the justification for the 6 out of 10 for me was I didn't think it was going to have a huge impact on the market as a whole, but it was going to have an impact on some people, and like a very specific impact. So if you were a person who in 2022 purchased an investment condo in a building that was rentals allowed, you probably overpaid to get that. When all of a sudden the market opened up completely, and because there was a premium on those.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden your equity's been eaten into.
True.
Right?
And they did it again, and this is where we'll talk about this for our future prognostications of sweater scores in the coming here. But you're right. There have definitely been people that have been impacted by quick decisions from our government that have impacted their property values.
At the flip side of that would basically be somebody that purchased in a unit that was no rentals allowed because they wanted that kind of sense of, pride of ownership in a property that they're looking to purchase. And this certainly isn't all tenants, but there's sometimes a sense that if all of a sudden a building opens up to all tenants, the pride of ownership might not necessarily be there.
Oh, it's true. I mean, we all know it, right?
So there could have been an impact on equity there as well.
Definitely.
That was why I gave that one 6 out of 10. It wasn't a market mover, but it did impact
some people in a significant way.
It opened up the rental supply, which was part of the goal as well. Age restrictions. So basically anything under a 55 plus now becomes essentially open to all ages. So all those 40 plus, 19 plus, I don't know what other pluses there were at this point, but those seem to be the most common ones. You've seen like 40 plus, 19 plus sort of thing. All of a sudden those are either all ages or they're 55 plus, which caused some interesting conversations. But, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, I didn't see a huge difference. You said a 4 out of 10. Would you say that was pretty accurate?
I think so, for similar reasons to the 6 out of 10. It wasn't a major market mover. I think it was less of a market mover than the rentals allowed, but there were some people very specifically that got impacted by that. I had a couple of clients in particular early on in 2023 where I remember driving into one complex and I was like, are you sure this isn't age restricted? Because I was looking around and it was like those small rancher style townhouses. And my team member at the time was like, no, there was no age restrictions on the listing. I'm like, this feels like an age restricted complex. Well, lo and behold, it used to be age restricted. Then it wasn't age restricted for a couple of months while the property managers were getting their stuff together. And then all of a sudden, my young family that were looking at this townhouse were about to find out that it was going to go 55 plus. They would have lost a lot of equity if I hadn't done a ton of digging there. Like, I went and found strata property or strata members like in the complex. I'm like, you have to be honest with me right now. Are you considering going 55 plus? And they were like, yeah, candidly we are. And they went 55 plus. If my young folks had bought there while we were in that kind of interim period, they would have lost tens of thousands of dollars.
CSI strata here. Oh my gosh. Getting wild. Okay. Home buyer rescission period. You gave this one a 2 out of 10 sweater scores. Home buyer rescission, please, in your best 15 seconds. What's the home buyer rescission period?
It's a 3-day get out of jail free card.
Yeah, but you got to pay
there's a very small fee related, and I think the reality is in a market where there were subjects in most offers for a minimum of 7 days, let's say, having a 3-day rescission period, kind of get out of jail free card, it really didn't touch the market. And what did I predict?
You said two sweaters out of 10
so
here
also
on this
very
one.
Low, and it was very, very low. We saw a handful of rescissions at the brokerage, but very, very few.
Oh, and so just to provide a little more color, this is basically to try and counteract all these potential people from making, you know, crappy offers on listings that were not going to come together, right? So really at the end of the day, I mean, dude, that was on point. On point.
Hopefully that gives people a bit of confidence heading into 2024.
Yeah, so clearly everything that David and I say today is going to be
gospel truth, completely dependable. Bet the farm. Please don't. This is not financial advice. We're joking. I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah, where's the disclaimer? Dan's going to put the disclaimer on the episode. These guys don't know what they're talking about, but they clearly make good bets. So you want to hear our hockey score bets? We'll start talking those later too. Make you some real money.
That's how I bought my first townhouse, but we won't go there. It was soccer, not hockey, though.
Future episodes coming in hot takes. All right, so let's get into 2024. That's a crazy number to say. My mind is still spinning thinking about that. Feels like yesterday. We were just entering the lovely year of 2020. Okay, let's talk about it. We got a lot going on, man.
I want to talk to you about rates to start on this, to be honest, because obviously this is going to your audience, but it's also going to my audience, and I think it would really benefit people just to get a sense of what's going on with variable rates. Fixed rates, what's happening on renewals, what are your predictions on the mortgage side of things heading into?
So we got to do, but before we talk about that specifically, so let's pull something out. We're going to change this up. From my scores are going to be pugs.
I like that.
So for those who don't know, and Chewy's here right now, my 3 pugs. There's actually shockingly people that don't know I have a pug because the flow state and all that kind of, I know. Please, guys.
I take an antihistamine over here.
He's not blowing up yet, but when he runs, we know what's going on. So we're going to make this pugs. How many pugs out of 10? And you can keep your sweaters. So when we talk about rates and our rate predictions, we should be more clear in what it would be that would impact the potential market. And what's the hottest thing that people are talking about right now, which is part of our future conversations. Here is the impact of the Bank of Canada deciding to increase, decrease, or not decrease interest rates. Is that what you're referring to?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, when it comes to sweater score, I'm sticking on the upper end of the range there. I think I'm like a 9 out of 10. It's going to be the market mover for sure.
Well, here, the truth is real estate and interest rates and real estate are directly correlated. And we know that to be true. What was really interesting through 2023 is although we saw when rates came down, the buyer confidence came back, we saw prices go up, and those two were correlated really clearly. What was super interesting to me was that even through all of that, real estate prices, really overall kept going up, even in spite of rising interest rates once things calmed down. So there was that.
I think what it has the biggest impact on is volume over price.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point. So listen, Tiff Macklem came out just a few days ago. I guess we don't want to date this. So he came out in the end of November, and he basically said, we know that rates are high. We know that there's pain. We know that there's some affordability issues. We know that these things are happening. And then he referenced the 1970s, whereby he basically said, like, listen, we tried to raise rates in the 70s, and I pull this up here. We tried to raise rates in the 70s, but then we took our foot off the gas too soon. Yeah. And guess what happened? Inflation came back, and it came back badder and meaner than ever before.
And that's where you hear all those stories of the mid 80s with their
tell me about that, Boomer. Please keep going.
Yeah. Oh, if I hear another one of those.
Oh man. So essentially, here's the thing. My feedback on this is not going to be shocking to hear that the actual increases in interest rates have not fully worked their way through the economy. However, as you know, and you very clearly know, that is not the only factor that's going to impact what people decide to do over the coming months. It is that emotional element that I think will start to drive things. And I'm a little bit nervous that we're going to push back the rate decreases purely based on people kind of speculating on when rates will come back down. That doesn't mean that interest rates won't come back down. I think all signs point to the fact that we're headed for some form of a recession. And the data says it. Like, the data shows it absolutely virtually everywhere. And so, what is my score out of? What is the impact that interest rates will have on our market this year? It'll be exceptionally high, 10 pugs out of 10 pugs. And here's two reasons why. Number one, because people are now going to be predicting when rates are coming down, they're going to make decisions based on the future more now than ever before. Yep. The second is because there are so many mortgage renewals coming up, and I don't want to feature date too much for our conversation here, that will impact what people decide to do on the buy and the sell side. And there'll be a lot of people who choose to sell real estate without getting the advice that they need to get, right? And in addition to that, the moment that rates do start to slide back down, that affordability scale comes back up, which means, boom, of course, those people that were waiting that just couldn't buy, that pent-up demand is going to blow, and it's going to absolutely blow. So I just think that interest rates right now dictate almost 90% of the current real estate market, with the obviously not factoring in the supply and demand consideration as that question. And there's no doubt that this year will be the year of essentially everything combusting into one place to see what actually happens. I truly don't believe that we have the 1970s part two. Like, I really don't. And one of the reasons for that is we just have so much data to suggest that they won't make that mistake again. And they're going to follow exactly what happened last time and just not do it. They're going to hold rates high until they actually see things come back down. So
it's the way Jerome Powell's been talking down at the Fed as well. I mean, he's said repeatedly that they're not going to take their foot off the gas until the interest rate hikes do their job.
Yep.
I think I am a little bit skeptical that the interest rate hikes will do their job. As we talked about last year, I gave that Benjamin Tal quote where he was like, raising rates without reducing government spending, which Tiff Macklem at the Bank of Canada referenced very recently. Mm-hmm. Raising rates without reducing government spending is like having, according to Benjamin Tal, the CIBC economist, is like having a dehumidifier and a humidifier in the same room and seeing who wins. So I think, unfortunately, some of the fundamental reasons for our inflationary crisis aren't being taken care of. Like spending. We do eventually need to see that drop, or the interest rate hikes won't do their job as well as they possibly could.
Yep.
And really, it's just kind of punishing the citizenry for no reason. It's not going to work.
Well, so we have a conversation on inflation as an impact. Yeah. So I'm going to rate real estate interest rates a 10 out of 10 as far as impact. Yeah. I couldn't get any higher.
And I'm going to go for a 9 out of 10 only because, I also know that there's going to be a handful of people out there who obviously are going to continue to have to make their moves happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, well, we already started the conversation. So 10 pugs out of 10, 9 sweaters out of 10. So we're on the same page on that Very piece. Much. We already did a little pre conversation into inflation, and that was our second point here, was the impact of inflation on the marketplace as well. Well, inflation, interest rates, it's all kind of tied together.
Well, it is, and that is an interesting point. Like, I was thinking about that on the way over here. Like, historically, housing, real estate in general, used to be a hedge against inflation. But since we have become so leveraged as a country, and it's not just Canada, it's people across the Western world, housing hasn't really functioned quite so well as a hedge against inflation, because the way that people are purchasing housing requires such large loans, and the interest rates are, higher than they have been for the last couple of decades. So it has been interesting to observe housing and real estate in general not functioning as such a good hedge against inflation.
Well, on the inflation side of things, and like, what will that do and how will that impact the real estate market? Because rates and so forth are tied together, but it is a separate conversation. You referenced it before. Listen, man, like Tiff Macklin came out and said exactly what you said. He's like, guys, you guys are the government. Stop spending so much freaking money because you're fueling this.
That back in like this time last year, and it took him another year to come out and say it. I'm like, he needed to be saying that 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago for us to actually not end up in the mess that we're in.
I also love the fact that if you were to look at the chart and you were to look at all the things that are impacting, consumers' money and how much they have, in the top was interest rate increases is impacting inflation. So it's like this perverse circle of spending and increases where again, Macklem's like, guys, my hands tied behind my back. Like, what else do you want me to do here? Like, there's no other options.
It's the humidifier and the dehumidifier.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly. So on that note, some of the other factors to impact inflation, to whether or not this will have a big impact this year, would include concerns or thoughts on the economic shift, meaning what's going to happen with regards to employment. Are we going to see major employment shifts?
So that plays into my kind of fundamental philosophy here, where I remember it was in October of last year when there was kind of a surprise in the employment data. It was like 124,000 jobs added or something like that. And everybody was like, see, no recession. There's 124,000 jobs that's been added. And then I went in and actually looked at the data, and the vast majority of those jobs were public sector jobs, not private sector jobs. And the way that those jobs are being compensated is through deficit spending at the governmental level. So if all these people have now been given these government jobs, but the only way that they're being afforded is through deficit spending, that's actually worsening the inflationary crisis, because we're having to continue the deficit spending to employ those people. So yeah, it looks good for like a short term. You've just smashed your microphone with your coffee.
Caffeine's coming in hot.
The caffeine's coming in hot. It looks good from like a short term, headline, but long term, that's bad for inflation.
Yeah, and without getting into a whole dialogue about what's going to happen in regards to employment, recent statistics that really were of interest to me is the amount of people that are going self-employed. Yeah. It's almost gone reverse of what it was, a number of years ago. It has gone basically reverse. People are now having to take on employed-based positions for a variety of reasons.
They're looking for that security.
Yep. Taxes, security. Like, the government's not really promoting or making it easy for people to be self-employed right now.
Small business is a tough space to be in right now.
Definitely. And so, truth of the matter is, unemployment will go up. We're seeing more part-time and low-paying jobs and not enough of those medium to high-paying jobs. And the employment gap is widening, which will impact real estate, in my opinion. It's hard to put a specific score on this because inflation is ingrained in real estate, and the whole point of the conversation is that, again, it is a hedge. I still think it is a smart long-term play. I showed you a chart recently where rental costs have now increased above the cost of living, and it's growing at this point right now, the cost of owning, I should say. So inflation, again, just like interest rates, will play a big role. I believe that this year, unsurprisingly, is the year that we start to actually see things unravel, and we see the results, good, bad, or ugly. I mean, it's hard to give a certain amount of pugs on this one here, but obviously I can't beat a 10 out of 10. So we'll give this one an 8 out of 10 on the pug impact score, purely because there are some things that may or may not happen this year to impact the real estate market. Your thoughts?
I'll give an 8 out of 10 on the sweater score as well, mostly because inflation is obviously so influential in deciding what's going to happen with the interest rates.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a side swipe here. We're going to move forward we're going to talk West Coast centric here. Okay. We're going to talk about the British Columbia government, and we're going to bundle it all together. We talked about one of the changes they made for 2023, but this year it's been a complete, a nonstop barrage of changes on the government. So let's, I guess, list them off as we go here. So
unilateral announcements.
Yeah, let's just change and devalue people's money and completely like, oh man, like my mind is spinning. So like, okay, so we have the short-term rental change. We'll get into this in a sec. So short-term rentals, obviously now not being allowed essentially, unless you live in the home. We have the changes to land rules. So virtually everybody can build a multi-unit family home anywhere and everywhere at this point right now. In addition to that, there were, hold on a second here. I must be forgetting a couple of them. There's a couple coming down the pipe. We did talk about the age restrictions and so forth. What was the other one here? I'm forgetting the BC.
Rental was another big one.
Right. So there's a couple more that are likely to come down the pipe, but let's just stop there for a second because I think those two deserve a pretty...
The theme is basically, it's very difficult for us to predict things when these announcements are made from on high, and it's like, I gave you a few examples where I had specific clients who were potentially impacted to the tune of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. When you have this much interference in the market, how on earth do you advise people? Like, it was great advice a few years ago to be like, yeah, go buy a rental condo, and if you can short-term rental it, like Airbnb or VRBO or whatever, then like you're going to get these incredible returns.
Sure,
and
yeah.
Some people were able to do that. Some people paid extra money to be able to do that. Like I think of friends in certain marketplaces like Kelowna, where there was a very kind of dense core there, where short-term rentals were permitted at the municipal level. There were resorts in there as well. Like they made investment decisions based upon that, and obviously there's always going to be risk whenever you're making an investment decision, but then boom, from on high, no short-term rentals, when they thought that they had made the prudent decision of like, they weren't trying to just rent a random condo in Vancouver. They thought that they were purchasing something that would have that ability preserved for them. So the lack of predictability is really, really difficult. And if we then look at the zoning side of things, I mean, I really feel for some of the municipal governments who've been putting work in new neighborhood concept plans, new OCPs as well, zoning, like how do we build the infrastructure around increasing density, and then the province kind of out of nowhere goes, yeah, let's just build multiple units on any single family
everywhere.
Home
Screw
lot.
Sewage.
Like,
screw sewage, man.
Forget sewage, forget parking, forget schools, forget like how then are you supposed to make these decisions? It's very difficult.
I'm more concerned that we're going to see like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation going on here, where we got like sewers bubbling.
It is seasonal.
With the green. Yeah. So the short-term rental thing is like, it's mind blowing. You know, we had some people on the podcast in October when this was announced. Deanna and Amanda gave us some great insights. And then that time it was really fresh. You know, we've had a few months to absorb this, and it's still so fresh and so new. We've also seen the federal government announce some rules, which we'll touch on in a second here. That one to me, I can't wrap my head around how you can vilify an entire industry and suggest that is a direct solution without looking at what the positive that it brings as well. I mean, one of the highest and most impacted places is going to be the Okanagan, as we know, is very, very, very widely known. Then the Okanagan, there's a lot of Airbnbs and rentals, and people go there for vacation for obvious reasons. Beautiful place to live. And there was a lot of negatives there too. Obviously, we saw people Airbnb everything and neighbors being upset about that. They brought in a licensing structure. They made short-term allowed buildings. They were like, I think they were doing it the right way.
They were trying to thread the needle. And satisfy as many stakeholders as they could. Another example of a municipality where I first became kind of aware of restrictions around short-term rentals. Every year, my family, we go to the same property on the Sunshine Coast in the municipality of Sechelt, right? Sechelt were one of the first municipalities to come out and basically not just limit, but very close to ban short-term rentals. I'm like, oh man, what is that going to do for the tourism industry? Like, there's barely any hotels there. Is a family like mine, where we're a family of 5, are we supposed to rent like a 2-bedroom hotel room, like not on the beach? Like, I kind of struggle a little bit with that. And then it moved from the municipal level up to the provincial level, and now, as of very recently, it's moved from the provincial level up to the federal level as well. I'm like, how do you can't make particularly nuanced legislative decisions from on high for all of Canada without there being unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, the federal government basically just came out and said, essentially, you can no longer use one of the most beneficial, tax rules around a short-term rental that you could use on any type of investment, which is that if you have a short-term rental and it's not your primary residence and you're making money off of this, assuming it's allowed, you can no longer claim any expenses. So you can't claim your mortgage mortgage interest. You can't claim your cleaning expenses. You can't claim anything else, which basically means that this is a completely taxed business now, which then continues to devalue the point of even having it. So that's going to run some obviously out where unless they're making hand over fist money on it, why would you bother, right? More money out of your pocket.
I have a friend recently, in fact, it's a neighbor of mine. He came to me a couple of days ago and he's like, to make this viable, I have to have it rented out every single day of the month, every single day of the year. Otherwise, I'm going behind.
Yeah.
And like, that's just not a realistic expectation. He had made a number of different decisions based upon that. I wasn't his realtor, but he wanted to kind of knock some ideas around, and now they're going to have to sell that product, which is part of the reason for this. But I think we run the risk with this kind of like eat the rich philosophy, where it's like, oh, these rich landlords, like, who cares if they're out? These aren't rich folks. Like, these are, just regular middle class people that made an investment decision with the information they had at the time, and then all of a sudden, bam, rug's being pulled out from under.
So here's the crazy thing about that, and we'll give it a pug sweater score in just a second about what the impact of these will be on it. Is that in many circumstances, interesting thing is a lot of people who own a lot of these short-term rentals are companies and or corporations. The masses of them, a lot of them are actually hotel owners who own a lot of short-term rentals in these cities as well. Mm-hmm. So they kind of had a little bit of both, which is interesting to hear. So who does this benefit? This benefits hotels. This definitely, benefits the government because they can say, hey, we did something, right? There's some benefit there. And then obviously,
benefit,
the people who were doing it unregulated or unlicensed, it probably benefits some of the neighbors who are dealing with some shit that comes along with, having short-term rentals right beside your house. But, at the end of the day, very short-sighted. I think that you should definitely have them licensed. There should be certain areas where they're allowed or not allowed.
That's nuanced. That's like trying to thread the needle.
Yeah.
But for example, the property that we rent every single year in Seychelles, it's a $2 million property on the beach. Like, that's not going to be returned to the rental pool for some seasonal worker to be able to live in. Like, again, that's what happens when you get kind of carte blanche changes top down. There's no nuance to it, and it generally just ends up impacting people negatively and not really doing much to solve the problem.
So my pug score, so how I'm going to say my impact, I guess my impact will be how much does this impact the housing market, and not necessarily the rental market, but just the resale market. I would give it a 5 pugs out of 10 pugs. And here's why I would even go that high. I would go that high because there's no doubt that this will certainly devalue some areas and devalue certain properties. So there's an impact to the value of the properties, and you might see a flood to the market for a short period of time. There will be definitely some minor impacts to rental rates in these areas as some people try to rent them out long term, therefore pushing it down. I believe it'll be short-lived, and it will probably have a greater impact on the local economy and people coming to visit more so than the intended purpose of obviously trying to get more rental stock. So I'm a 5 out of 10 on that one.
I agree. This one reminds me very much of the kind of rentals allowed change that we saw this time last year.
Right.
And the no age restrictions, one of which I gave, or not no age restrictions, but a limitation to a 55 plus. I gave one a 6 out of 10 and the other a 4 out of 10. So let's shoot in the middle, and I'll join you on the 5.
Okay.
I think it will have a very specific impact on a handful of people. Some of them will be up in equity, but most of them will be substantially down in equity, and that's always sad when that happens to people. When there's really very little benefit, because I think at the mass market level, there's not going to be too big an impact unless you're in one of a handful of very specific markets.
Okay, so we're both
thinking particularly about Kelowna. If there is a spot I want to get to, and we've just kind of talked like the short-term rental side of things and that eat the rich perspective, I would be interested to kind of press in a little bit to that philosophy that we seem to be seeing become very, very popular. I am a little bit concerned that the kind of anti-landlord perspective in general, not just short-term rentals. I can understand the frustration with short-term rentals. I can also understand some of the frustration that with folks that have like 10, 20 investment properties in their portfolio. But a lot of real estate investors are just kind of your mom and pop investors. They've been holding that property for a period of time. It provides like a rental opportunity for a member of the community. And yes, rents have been going up, but we do have substantial restrictions around how that happens in British Columbia. I'm concerned that with the rising costs of maintaining these investment properties, it was tough to cash flow an investment property in the Lower Mainland as it was. Now that interest rates are through the roof, there's a lot of those mom and pop investors who do not, like, they just don't have the ability to eat that increase in their interest rates. They're going to have to sell those properties, and it's highly unlikely that those properties are going to be purchased by other investors, where it's going to go back into the rental pool for, you know, someone in our community who perhaps can't afford a place of their own. Most likely it's being purchased by someone to live in, because it's the only reason why you would do that in the current interest rate environment, which is actually going to make competition for rentals even tougher.
Yep.
And I can see rental rates going even higher. So I think we need to be nuanced and not just have this, like, you know, forget these landlords, they're all rich idiots, yada, 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 and I'm being polite in my language. But we've all seen that mentality, and I don't think it actually benefits folks that need to rent in the long term.
So aside from the, you know, angry TikTok ranters and X or Twitter ranters, here's the thing. You hit the nail on the head with each and every one of those points. The vast majority of people that own, and in Canada, there's proof everywhere. The statistics show that there's a very large percentage of rental housing which is owned by you or I or your mom or your neighbor, and they don't own 10 properties or 20 properties. And even if they did, whatever, they own 1, 2, or 3, and this provides rental opportunities. In BC, it's also the tenant who has most of the power, not the landlord. So it's not like people are getting kicked out left, right, and center. And knowing a lot of our clients, have a large percentage of our clients who have done very well financially because they bought and kept these properties, they want to take care of their tenants. So they take very good care of their tenants, unlike some of these large, you know, apartment buildings where it's a very difficult time as a tenant to try and even get a hold of somebody for that matter, right? And you're absolutely right.
There is going to be a consolidation, I think, where it's going to be mostly corporate landlords.
Yeah, so this is where I'm going to go with this, is if anybody, for those people who are vilifying the mom and pop landlord, when you get what you ask for, where you no longer can get the average, I don't know that this can happen, but when you can no longer get the average person owning most of the real estate, you're going to hate what happens because of two things. First of all, like what you mentioned, the large conglomerate corporates who don't give two craps about what you're doing.
They've got shareholders to answer to.
The second thing is, and I posted about this the other day, in the United States and in Canada, there are multi-billion, billion dollar entities buying up neighborhoods and virtually cities, specifically single family homes everywhere, with the purpose of renting them out long-term and doing exactly what we want to be doing right now, who don't care what the interest rates are. They don't care about the rules or anything like that. And they're making these decisions all over North America, and they're getting more and more and more funding. So if you don't like what's happening right now, you're going to hate what happens when the corporations start owning your neighborhoods. So this is one of the big reasons why I push people to stay in the game as long as you can, because I mean, first of all, if they're doing it, there's probably something we should be learning from that. But if you're hating it on every landlord, myself included, who we love our tenants and take very good care of them, then you're barking up the very wrong tree, because it's not going to do what you're hoping to. And that's just a fact.
Yeah, I do have some kind of societal level concerns around that. So I hope that we can, as a society, have a little bit more of a nuanced discussion about that.
Yeah. Look somewhere else for your hate, not the realtors and mortgage brokers. My God, man. All right. So that was, I mean, we gave our thoughts and feelings. Did we give a score? We didn't give a score, did we? On the STR, or we did? We did.
On the STR, we went 5 out of 10.
Okay. And then we just went on a rant. Okay. Perfect. And then the BC changed to the land use rules, which allows us now to do, I think, is it 6 units?
I think this year it won't have too big an impact.
No, yes.
But I think, so for this year, I'll give it like a 3 out of 10.
Yep.
I think it's too unknown right now, the impact that it's actually going to have. Yep. I also think a lot of the people that would look to benefit from that aren't your mom and pop investors. It's generally going to be, you know, mid to large size developers.
Yep.
And a lot of those guys are struggling just to complete some of the projects they've already started, or, you know, sell enough units to actually get the land that they currently own up and running and into development. So I don't see too big an impact this year. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit of noise about it, but I'll give it like a 2 or a 3 out of 10.
So in short, you can, anything that's larger than 3,000 square foot, you can build multiple units on a lot, no matter what the land was before. So
3 or 4 units.
Yeah. So if you hated crappy parking in your neighborhood before, you're going to hate it now. Parks, neighborhoods are going to be overrun. If, in 10 years, if this happens.
I can see the municipalities really pushing back on this. And that's why I just don't think there's going to be that big an impact yet this year.
Yeah. This is another one of those ones where they're putting, and I don't have any problem with developers, or they do what they do. Anybody could go out there.
We need to increase density.
Yeah.
But again, my argument is always going to be for nuance. Let's do it thoughtfully rather than just all of a sudden, throwing up a bunch of multifamily in a residential neighborhood when you don't have the infrastructure to carry it.
I think if there's anything, it would shorten the time it takes to get the permits to build, for sure, which could be done relatively easily. It doesn't need to take 6 months.
I think that's part of the reason that the province have come down and done this, is that the municipalities weren't making those changes fast enough. And so the province have taken it into their own hands, but they've just kind of brought a hammer when really we needed a little bit more of an incisive tool. To be a little bit more specific.
So that one, you're right. This year, a relatively minimal impact as far as housing is concerned, other than conversation. I would say that's a 2-pugger. We're gonna go with a 2-pugger out of 10.
2-pugger and a 3-sweater. I would also just caution any of the listeners, you're probably going to hear a lot of noise about this in the coming year, of salespeople trying to shark you into something. It's very unpredictable right now. I'm not going to be making any moves based on this at all.
Okay. And the last one is a general thought, and this will be interesting to talk about impact. One of the trends since COVID of 2020 now, I don't know if it's still on, but whatever, since that shut down, has been buying behaviors, people moving in and out of town, migrating across the country, moving from BC to Alberta. Everybody's going to Alberta, actually. Buying properties in small towns or different areas and different locations. And that's really changed the dynamic for a lot of different cities and communities, and also changed costs on, like, let's say the Okanagan or in many other areas, as we've seen a lot of people come into these towns. What are your thoughts on if that trend continues and how that might impact real estate values in or out of town?
I think there's been a flattening basically since 2020, where the premium that would be paid to be closer to the heart of the city, like Vancouver downtown, has dropped substantially. I mean, you and I had a conversation just outside here like less than an hour ago in the context of commercial real estate, where, what you can lease in Vancouver, there's actually like very, very little difference, if any, compared to Langley. In fact, you might have an easier time finding what you're looking for in Vancouver compared to Langley, right?
Absolutely.
Which is wild. Like if anybody had predicted that 5-10 years ago, they would just laugh at you. And I hear it all the time, just on the forums and on social media, news articles, whatever, and in conversation with people, like, Langley is like not really the flight from the affordability crisis that it used to be, because Vancouver's come down in many cases, and Langley, Abbotsford, the surrounding areas have come up. Now it's still more affordable, and personally, from a lifestyle standpoint, I prefer to live in the Fraser Valley than I do in Vancouver. Happy to visit Vancouver occasionally, but I prefer to, raise my family in the valley. That does make it tougher for people who used to just be able to continue moving east and east and east and east for that affordability, right?
Yeah. Interprovincial migration seems to have come down from the conversations that we've had. There used to be a massive group of people moving over to Vancouver Island, moving to the interior, moving up to small towns, as you mentioned. I think Vancouver downtown starts to come back over the next couple of years, certainly as we start to approach like the FIFA World Cup in 2026 and so forth. I think that'll put another spotlight back on Vancouver, and you'll start to see that pick back up. Crazy value if you're looking to invest there and you have the cash to do so, I believe as well. My thoughts and opinions on the matter are this: the whole work from home thing it's not gone, but I think the mirage of like, hey, we're gonna do this forever has changed. I think people are back to even like a hybrid is much more common now, and we're seeing that. So people still want to be relatively close to their office, and I'm having more of those conversations now than I was certainly a year ago or 2 years ago. It's not close to my office, or it's not close to my work. I want to be pretty close by. And so I think that's going to change the way or the dynamic back towards some form of city living. Now, you're right. Langley has grown substantially in 3 years, and surrounding areas, for those who are listening for different areas, I mean, we're about 45 minutes out of the downtown core. It's becoming its own core. And we're seeing these sub-communities start to pop up, but you're no longer seeing that crazy value shift. You are seeing some value, but you're not seeing that crazy value. And the idea of people moving to out of town seems to be more the boomers or the generation of retirees, we don't want to go, not from a negative purpose, but those are the ones that we're kind of back to seeing move again.
Yep.
Less of the small families, although the trend is still a little bit there. So,
yeah, I agree. I think we're just going to continue to see what we saw last year, which is a little bit of a reversal of that trend. I think Vancouver will come back over the next couple of years. I think the World Cup's a good argument for that. We saw what happened with the Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's great. I do think there's opportunity there, which is perhaps where we want to go next after we've given our sweater score for the...
Yeah. So migration. I would say due to the fact that it's kind of dropped off and almost pulled an inverse, and I think we'll probably see people start to actually, funny enough, sell off some of their vacation properties and so forth, just
that's
because the cost of...
already, yeah.
Yep, seeing that happen. I would say that this probably is, 3.5 pugs.
Oh, I was going to go 3. Everybody's going to hate the fact that we're just agreeing with each other. We're supposed to fight. That
Be
makes
wrong.
Better content.
Well, 3.5.
What do you want to fight about? Let's fight about it.
Let's talk about, I don't know, man. I think let's talk about the last opportunity that people have, even though we beat the crap out of it for a period of time. What is the one thing that we talked about before we started recording here today is like, I just told you and you just told me in separate times, we're planning to buy.
Actually, this is interesting because that is something that we've almost fought about in the past. Like, because we took different approaches and we took different approaches for our own reasons, and it's benefited us both very well. So, you are the epitome of the guy who was able to leverage and leverage well. You have personally lived out, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but really it's just celebrating you for practicing what you preach. You did the whole buy the condo, keep the condo, buy the townhouse, keep the townhouse, buy the single family home, live in the single family home, purchase commercial real estate. Like, you are practicing what you preach. We had a conversation, I think it was about 2 years ago, and I was like, I'm getting a little bit nervous. I'm getting a little bit nervous about interest rates and inflation and yada, yada, yada. So I didn't go out and leverage myself because, I have 4 dependents and a degree of responsibility where like I really can't afford to get too leveraged on my children's home. So I definitely missed out on a number of opportunities to make a few bucks here and there. But I made a lifestyle decision rather than a financial decision. So I think it's worked out for both of us because we're now in a position where, for the first time, for me anyway, in about 3-4 years, I would be considering purchasing real estate again, where I would feel like I'm not getting over leveraged and I'm not betting the farm on just up and up and up and up, because I do think there is some value again out there right now, and it sounds like you're potentially shopping as well.
Yep, absolutely, no doubt. Just finished preparing myself and pre-approving our file after thinking about it. And we've been looking at some things for a while, but it doesn't seem like statistically, given all the information that we just touched on right now, I know for a fact that something that we purchase right now will be a great long-term play. And I think that somebody who's well capitalized,
yep,
who is in a good position financially, who does feel comfortable where they're at when it comes to their income and their employment, I think if you still believe in real estate, which we clearly do, regardless of the government intervention, is very wise to consider getting right back into the market this time right now for all of those reasons and more.
I agree. So there's obviously like the investment property side of things there, which I imagine is what we're both kind of talking about and considering there. And on that front, pre-sale actually interests me for the first time in a very long time. I've been very anti-pre-sale for a long time because of the unpredictability of the market, and it did burn people. Like, if I look at the assignments right now available on the multiple listing service,
crazy.
There are a lot of people trying to assign properties that they wrote that contract like 1 year ago, thinking it was always just going to go up and up and up and up, and the interest rates were going to remain low forever. They're now having a very tough time unloading those contracts through an assignment. Right now, I think we have the opposite, where if something doesn't complete for 2-3 years, I'm feeling relatively confident that the interest rates will hold or pull back over that kind of 2-3 year time frame, and as a result, prices will. There's a chance that prices will appreciate. So I might be paying today's prices, but by the time it comes time for me to complete, hopefully I'll have a lower interest rate, and as a result, that asset will have appreciated over time. So I think there's the pre-sale condo opportunity that I'm getting interested in, and I think anybody that's followed me over the years knows that's unusual for me to say. The other opportunity out there right now for just kind of your average consumer, for me, for my average client, an upsize move has made a lot of sense for the last few months. That's been going out in our newsletter. If people can qualify for an upsize move, and if it doesn't stretch them beyond their comfort level, I never want to push anybody beyond their comfort level, the upsize move is making a lot of sense, because generally in real estate, the higher they are, the harder they fall. So there's been a little bit of a closing of the gap. So whether you're moving from a condo into a townhouse into a single family home on a smaller lot, into a single family home on a larger lot, most likely the gap has closed over the last 2 years. And so there is a little bit of a strategic opportunity there. Those are the two things I'm looking at right now for myself and for my clients.
Love it. Love it. Well, you're the expert, so give your advice. I appreciate you doing that. And I'm just focused on your sweater right now. We got to hold off here because there's so much more content that we're going to give them. And Dave, I look forward to having you come back on the pod for future episodes, my friend. I know you got to fly, so appreciate you coming back down.
Time to get back to work. It's Saturday afternoon.
Let's go. Thank you for listening, guys. We appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.
That was an unreal episode of The Flow. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did on my side right here. If you haven't already done so, make sure to check out all of the incredible resources that we have available. You can find us on Instagram at Flow Mortgage Co. You can find us on our website, getflowmortgage.ca. And of course, don't forget our free first-time homebuyer masterclass that's currently available on our website for anyone who listens to the episodes. And if you loved what you listened here today, the only thing that we ask for is to share this with someone else that you think this could help. And hey, maybe leave us a great review online.